Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session about building enterprise-grade Slack apps. I'm Amy, I lead our app directory team, and I'm thrilled to be here today, joined by Greg from our partner engineering team, and Prachi, who's an engineering manager at Box. Today, we'll be talking you through about how you can build for the enterprise, understanding admins and what they look at when they're assessing apps before installing them. Greg will take you through some technical best practices when it comes to building that solid foundation for an enterprise-grade app. And we'll learn from Prachi about how she and her team at Box approach building an app for enterprise customers. So, why are we even here talking about enterprise in the first place? Why does it matter? For those of you who've been using Slack for a long time, you know that we've grown over the last 6 years into an enterprise-grade platform that organizations of all sizes and industries use to get their work done. You can see just a snapshot of some of the customers here. These organizations span enterprises of all sizes, like SAP and News Corp, organizations in regulated industries like TD Ameritrade, and even into university systems like MIT and Berkeley. Many of these organizations are household names and include hundreds, if not thousands, of workspaces in Slack. So what does that mean for you? Well, it means there's incredible opportunity for growth and discovery as you grow into enterprise customer workspaces. From a numbers perspective, the opportunity is massive. Getting your app installed on just one of these enterprise instances can expose your app to thousands of users and help drive your adoption at scale. From a credibility perspective, if you gain momentum by being installed on an enterprise workspace, you'll show that your app is built for enterprise needs. And whether you're new to building for Slack or you've been building on Slack for a long time, we'll run through some of the information you need about building a high-quality app for enterprise. So when you're thinking about building your app and product, we know that you're already thinking about how to build a great experience for your end users. When you're building for enterprise, there's a second audience that you need to take into consideration. These large organizations have settings that mean that not everyone on a workspace can install an app, and often those need to go through approval by an admin first. And that means that you're building to an understanding of what admins will be looking for when they review and assess those apps. So the questions those admins will ask themselves will often fall into three main buckets. The first, is your app secure? The second, is your app scalable? And then finally, is your app easy to use? So we'll dive into each of those and some practical tips to make sure you're answering those questions admins might have as they assess your app. The first, is your app secure? As a Slack app, you need access to data, but for admins, they're going to be looking at what access you're requesting. They'll also be asking themselves, do the benefits that your app provide their workspace outweigh the cost of that access to data? So from day one, you should be thinking about how to build with security and data compliance in mind, ready to answer those questions admins might have. You could have the most beautiful, useful app in the world, but if you aren't building with security in mind, admins aren't going to approve that app for installation. So when it comes to security, what are admins evaluating? Well, they're evaluating two main things. Is your Slack app only accessing the bare minimum of data on their workspace that it needs to function? And the second, as a developer, as a company, as an organization, can you be trusted to provide critical security practices with their data? Practically, this means requesting scopes using granular permissions. So we launched granular permissions earlier this year, and these are permissions that are much more tightly scoped around functionality that you need to use with your bot token. So making sure that you request the minimum number of scopes every way through your building will ensure that you address admins' questions about permission proactively. Granular permissions will allow you to get that narrow set of scopes on your bot token, and that will also mean that if your app is powered by that granular permission token, you won't have to worry about a user installing an app and then being disabled and your app no longer working. That bot token will stay remaining working on the workspace. Granular permissions are the foundations of everything that we're building on platform. So if you haven't already upgraded your app to granular permissions, make sure you do so by the end of the year. We have a guide on our API site to show you how to do that. And again, as a reminder, you can see here, this is a screenshot of what admins will see when they go through the OAuth flow. They'll also see your scopes on the app listing page for your app in the app directory. And this is key reminder that admins will be looking at the scopes your app requests. So make sure that you're showing them that you're considering how you interact with their data and that you're thinking through and respecting that as you're building. If you're building with security in mind, then this is where your app shines. The Security and Compliance tab, which we released earlier this year on the app listing, is where admins will go to assess security practices for your app. And this is where you get to give them more information about all of the hard work you're doing around security practices, data governance, and any certificates that you've worked hard to earn. Just because your app is using Slack's API, you will also have your own services. So this is the really important place for showing admins how you approach security overall in every aspect of your product. So this information paired with the scopes will help admins assess whether your app is being built from the ground up with security in mind. The next step is the question, is your app scalable? So when admins are asking themselves this, they're asking, is your app going to be able to be managed efficiently as the organization grows? Admins manage very complex organizations with thousands of channels across hundreds of workspaces, both internal and external. And when it comes to installing an app, this often means approving and installing it across each of the workspaces individually, which is time consuming. It might also mean that an app isn't installed in a workspace where it's needed, which leads to a subpar and confusing experience for those end users. And if there's a lot of overhead with getting your app installed, admins might decide not to install it at all. Which is why we're really excited to launch org-wide app deployment later this year. This is going to give enterprise admins a centralized place where they can come to deploy apps across their organization. They can choose to deploy it across every workspace in a click of a button, or choose just a subsection of the workspaces they want. And for extra delight, they can also choose to add your app to every new workspace that's created as the organization grows. So if you build your app to be org-wide app deploy compatible, you will be scaling your app across even the largest grid organizations as they grow and build and add more workspaces. Org-wide app deployment is going to be huge and impactful for all apps, but there are some use cases we know that admins are really looking for. And that's being able to easily deploy essential apps that every one of their employees use on a daily basis. So for example, WebEx or Box are used on a daily basis for calls and file management. The other use case is being able to deploy apps that have rich context information that helps teams stay aligned and informed and increases visibility. So for example, Salesforce has critical customer data that cross-functional teams use every day, from sales and finance and legal, and making sure that that Salesforce app and the data is available across an organization's workspaces really helps admins and teams at work get their work done. So there'll be more information about org-wide deploy later this year when we launch. And so speaking of transparency and alignment across teams, the second aspect of scalability that admins will be asking themselves about is, does your app function with Slack Connect? So for those of you who haven't heard of Slack Connect is where teams collaborate in channels with external vendors, partners, and customers. So for example, you can see in this slide here that there is a OneDrive app being used in a shared channel with the Edge agency. This makes it easier for them to share files and grant permissions to external collaborators without having to go into the file and do so there. Slack Connect can serve as a great discovery driver for your app as it's used in critical channels and workflows with connected teams. Others will be able to see firsthand the solution that your app offers to problems they encounter on a daily basis. From an admin's perspective, when assessing your app, they're going to want to know that your app works with Slack Connect, but also that it's taking into account privacy and data models. Make sure you're thinking about who has access to a Slack Connect channel and ensure that your app reacts appropriately when interacting with those users it may never have encountered before. Admins are going to want to know that your app functions correctly in a Slack Connect channel, but also that it reacts appropriately with the data that's being shared. Now, last but not least, is your app easy to use? We talked earlier about there being two audiences, your end user and the admins, and this is where that former audience comes back in. Admins have a lot of work to do, and they're going to want to make sure that any app they install on their workspace is really high quality and provides their employees with a fantastic experience. They're not going to want to spend hours troubleshooting, trying to get people onboarded, or dealing with unexpected DMs sent across an organization. So thinking through how you can be a really good host for any user who encounters your app is key to making sure admins will see your app as valuable. So this means thinking through the user's journey with your app, whether that's the fact that they've never encountered it before or they've been using it every day. For brand new users, give them a warm welcome. Help them understand what the app does, how it works, and how to get onboarded. For users who've been using your app every day, make them feel at home. Customize the information so that they can get the most value from it. In this example, you can see a message sent from the Salesforce app, and this is sent using the app home open event. And this is sent when a user opens an app DM for the first time. This message helps a user understand what the app will do, how to use it, and how to get connected. That means there's no more users confused who run into your app and aren't quite sure how to use it. So make sure you're sending that welcome message only the first time that a user opens a DM. However, otherwise they'll be getting the same welcome message every time. In that same theme of welcoming a user, you can use the Home tab for your app, which is a great place to welcome and onboard users. The Home tab is a customizable BlockKit-enabled surface for you to display dynamic information to users. And here you can see an example with Google Calendar, where again, the app Home is being used to give the user information about what the app does, how to use it, and then displaying an easy next step for getting connected. So you can use this as a way to make sure customers always know what they need to do next. Once your users are onboarded and getting value from your app, App Home then becomes a really powerful place for you to surface personalized and dynamic content to existing users. In this example, you can see that Help has designed the App Home tab as a dynamic dashboard to display management of help desk tickets. So there's a huge amount of valuable information here for users to jump to without having to manage many browser tabs. You can also see that there's a Learn More button and the option to open things in browser. So everything that a user might need is at their fingertips, even when they've been using this app day to day. So always consider where a user might be in their journey, whether it's their first ever encounter with your app, or if they've been using it every day. Use that app home and the customizable content to make them feel at home. Now, I know that was a lot of information. As the lead of the app directory, I would be remiss if I didn't also plug the importance of your app listing. When you are building out your app listing, think of it as the storefront for your app. It's the place where customers will encounter it for the first time in the directory, and it's your chance to shine. Make sure your description really covers the problem that your app is solving. We know that really helps customers understand the value of an app. Add screenshots that show your app at work in Slack to really help customers understand how it will function day to day, and even add a demo video to help them get a better sense of the value you'll be offering. The app listing is used as much by admins. Again, that's where you'll have your security and compliance information and information about scopes. So it's a fantastic place to really make your app shine with descriptions and information. I hope this information was helpful. This topic really is near and dear to my heart. My team and I spend every day looking at reviews. So we wanted to share some of the things we've learned from our highest quality apps. If you remember anything from today, I would say remember to always put your customer needs first and consider your app's security, scalability, and ease of use. And with that, I will pass it over to Greg, who's going to share some best practices from a technical perspective.
All right, thank you, Amy. I'm Greg. I'm a partner engineer here at Slack, which means I work with other software companies building applications on the Slack platform. If I had some time to spend with each of you individually, I would probably talk about two things. I would talk about how to deal with user IDs and how to build for the enterprise. Within your Slack application, there's a setting called User ID Translation. And when this setting is on, it allows Slack to send individual user IDs based on the team versus the enterprise. So that means for the same user, you can get multiple IDs, which requires your app to map those IDs and manage them. This can be very difficult to deal with. So we recommend, whenever possible, to turn the translation layer off. Once the translation layer is off, what you'll get is one user ID for an entire organization. So independent of how many teams a user is a part of, you'll just receive that one user ID, and you won't have to do that management on your end. So for net new apps, just leave this off and you'll be good. You'll never have to deal with it. For existing apps, you've likely already ingested these IDs and mapped those within your application. So what Slack has provided is an endpoint to help you migrate your application. So migration.exchange is an endpoint that accepts a batch of user IDs and just returns back the actual global IDs you should be using. What's cool about this endpoint is you don't have to worry about the type of ID. If there's not a local ID corresponding, then we'll just echo back that same ID into the mapping, which can be extremely useful. And the second thing I would talk about is just how to properly build for the enterprise and set yourself up for success. So the first one is translation layer, we talked about. Second, granular bot permissions. Amy mentioned this. If you have an existing app and you haven't moved to granular bot permissions, now is the time. All net new apps are created with this already in place, so you'll be okay. A lot of our new features only work with granular bot permissions, such as org-wide apps. Then if you don't have a enterprise sandbox, it's really difficult to build and test and deploy for the enterprise. So if you don't have one today, reach out to Slack and we'll get you set up, because you're really going to want to have a sandbox environment to build for the enterprise. Slack Connect, it's a hugely popular feature for an enterprise app. You're going to run this every single day. So it's a huge opportunity. If you're building an enterprise app, take a look at Slack Connect. And lastly, org-wide apps. So this is new. We announced it this week. Moving forward, our largest organizations, they're going to want to install once for their organization versus having to install at the team level. Next up, Prachi from Box is going to tell you a little bit about how they built on the Slack platform.
Thank you, Greg. How many of you have built an excellent app only to find out that enterprise admins aren't willing to install it into their workspaces? I'm sure many of us at some point. Hi, I'm Prachi Jadhav, Engineering Manager at Box. And today, I'm going to talk to you about how to build apps that enterprise admins love. Box is a cloud content management company. It provides a single platform for secure content management, collaboration, and workflow. My team's mission is to extend the power of Box with apps. Box has over 1,500 integrations. Recently, my team built Box for Slack app. It allows you to bring Box's rich content management capabilities for a file shared in Slack. Today, I'm going to walk you through our experience of building this app on Slack platform. I'll also share a framework that you can follow while building any app, and some key things to do before submitting your app to Slack App Gallery. Let's get started. When we started thinking about building this integration, we had key end user features in mind. We wanted to make it easy for end users to share Box file in Slack. We wanted to enrich the post-share experience by bringing in information like thumbnails and author into Slack. We wanted end user to update the collaboration levels of a Box file directly from within Slack. / commands to quickly perform operations like search a Box file, view your recents or favorites. We also wanted to integrate with Slack's native search by indexing the shared files that are shared in Slack. But we knew this is not going to be enough. Different customers have different requirements. So before building this application, we followed a framework. Let me walk you through it. The first step is customer study. On an average, an enterprise employee uses 10 different applications to get their work done. With remote work being the new normal, employees are connecting to these applications through unmanaged devices and connections. It's very important to keep track of the data that is being shared in these applications and make sure that it's secure. Different enterprises have different security, legal, and compliance requirements. Hence, it's essential to talk to multiple customers to understand their requirements. So once you start having conversations with your customers, you'll start to notice patterns. It's very important to notice these patterns because it will ensure maximum return on investment when you build these features. Now, the next step is to translate these patterns into features. But we are not done yet. The last but very crucial step is to go back to these customers and validate these features and app controls with them before giving a green light to your development team. So coming back to Box for Slack app. For customer study, we chose a wide variety of customers. Customers from sales, marketing, legal, HR, and finance departments. While having conversations with these customers, we started to notice patterns. Some customers wanted better control over a set of Slack workspaces and orgs that can be connected to Box account. Some requested ability to manage default experience of the integration. Some wanted to choose whether the contents of the shared Box files get indexed in Slack's native search or not. Some even requested visibility into app installation events for admins. Our customers were thrilled to see the end user features, but admins wanted granular control to control the experience of the app, as well as the data that is shared through this app. So we came up with granular controls for admins through Box Admin Console. Few of the settings are permissions for rich previews. It's an option to display previews for shared content based on file permissions in Box. Slack indexing option, which allows you to choose whether the contents of the shared Box file get indexed in Slack's native search. Enterprise Grid Allow List allows admins to set specific Enterprise Grid orgs and workspaces that can be connected to Box account. So we went back to the same set of customers and validated these controls. And now they were much more comfortable adopting our integration when it's built. In addition to customer study, before submitting your app, I would recommend you to follow a few steps. Avoid using broad scopes. As a general security principle, admin follow principle of least privilege. Use granular bot permissions to do that. This will allow your app to only request information that is needed for an app to function. It will also help you drive adoption into your security conscious customers. Localize your app if possible. Localization allows you to tailor the experience to diverse audiences. Make sure you do thorough security and penetration testing on your app. Pay extra attention to things like where are you storing your client ID and secrets? How are you storing that? Limit the token access to certain IPs only. Make sure you are reviewing the requests that are coming from Slack and only processing the requests that are coming from Slack. For the legal and compliance cautious customers, do a thorough legal and compliance review. It will help you to get answers to questions like, are you processing customer PII information? Where are you storing that information? How long you are retaining that information? Are you encrypting that information or not? Legal and compliance review helps you get answers to all these questions. Last but not least, QA testing. It will not only help you improve the quality of your application, but will also reduce the time required to review the app. I hope these things will help you in building your next enterprise-grade Slack app. Don't forget to check out Box for Slack app in Slack app directory. Thank you.